Yes, Dr. Tharaka, you can start your program.
Thank you very much, sir. A very good afternoon to all the distinguished guests and participants. Today we are gathered here for the inauguration ceremony and the first lecture of the International Lecture Series on Historical Development of Anthropology subject as a discipline in Asia. We are very proud to say that three renowned anthropology departments jointly organized this lecture series. The Department of Anthropology, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences of the University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Sri Lanka, Mrinalini, Datta, Mahavidyapith, Kolkata, India, and Dera Natung
Congratulations.
Government College, Itanagar, India. This collaborative effort that we are witnessing today aims to bring
Good
eminent
afternoon, everyone.
anthropologists from Asia under a single umbrella to cultivate and exchange anthropological knowledge. So, as the very first events of today's program, I would like to invite Dr. Suman Chakrabarti, coordinator of the lecture series, Mrinalini Datta Mahavidyapith, Kolkata, India, to welcome all of you and to introduce this international lecture series.
Oh, everybody, hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tharakananda. A good afternoon and evening to all of you, those who have joined
Good afternoon,
from
ma'am.
different
Good afternoon,
corners
sir.
in India and also abroad, specifically from Asian countries. Greetings to one and all. It gives me immense warmth and great pleasure to grace all of your presence in the interest of the entire committee. It gives me tremendous contentment to be presenting the welcome speech amongst the most esteemed personalities, specifically from anthropological fraternity. Distinguishing Professor Dr. Chameli A.D. Nahalagi, Head of the Department of Anthropology, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Sri Lanka, Principal of Dera Natung Government College, Itanagar, Arunachal Pradesh, India, and Principal of Mrinalini Mahavidyapith, Birati, Kolkata. Respected dignitaries from anthropology and allied disciplines, my dear colleagues, and our fellow students. On behalf of the organizing committee, my heartfelt welcome to all for this online international lecture series on historical development of anthropology as a discipline in Asia. I welcome our invited speaker of this inaugural session, Dr. Carlos P. Tatel Jr., Associate Professor and Chairperson of the Department of Anthropology, College of Social Science and Philosophy, University of the Philippines, for his kind acceptance to deliver on the aforesaid theme of the lecture series. Before we begin this lecture series, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you who sincerely committed to this event to make it a success. This event would have been impossible without the support of each and everyone present here. This lecture series is organized and conducted for the body students and researchers in anthropology to gain insight and information regarding the successful historical trend and current position of anthropology in Asian countries, and that would remain effective in their academic discourse and future research work across nations. The schedule of the lectures includes encouragement and discussions by the esteemed delegates. I ensure that lectures will be profitable and fruitful for everyone present here. Thank you one and all. Tharaka.
Thank you very much, sir. Now would like to invite Dr. M.Q. Khan, Principal of the Dera Natung Government College, Itanagar, India, is one of our committee's advisors to address the gathering. Over to you, sir.
Hello, am I audible to all?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Good
sir.
afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, respected chief advisors, organizers, including conveners, HODs, head of the departments of anthropology. And this is in the series of lecture, Inaugural Day, Professor Carlos, the resource person, the expert to deliver the inaugural lecture in the series on the topic Historical Development of Anthropology as a Discipline in Asia. The topic is indeed very vast because Professor Carlos is going to enlighten all of us on historical development of anthropology, not in one state, not in one country, but in entire Asia, the countries in Asia. When we talk of India, it represents all nooks and corners of India. So when we talk of historical development of anthropology in Asia, it certainly represents all countries within Asia, in Asia. So the topic is really very, very vast. And in series of this lecture, we can go for historical, next time, historical development in Sri Lanka, historical development in India, historical development in Bangladesh, historical development of anthropology in, say, China, in Pakistan, in Nepal, and so on and so forth. So that can be, or whatever the topics in coming times we take up under this series of lecture being designed, planned, and produced by the trio, Jayewardenepura University, Sri Lanka, and then again MDM, that is Mrinalini, Datta, Mahavidyapith, Bidati, West Bengal, Dera, Natung, Government College, Itanagar. They are going to write a sort of history through exchanging their expertise and knowledge of this upcoming anthropology as a discipline, as a subject, which certainly has gained renewed currency and relevance, and the role of anthropology has ever been expanding. When we talk about historical perspective also, there is hardly any area or discipline of education today to which anthropology does not have a concrete and a specific contribution to make or relevance to make. So we can say that today anthropology is gaining universal recognition, universal relevance. There is no any field of education in which anthropology is not having its relevance. It is relevant to each and every field, every realm of education, every area, every specialized aspect of education. Where there is an institution, there must be anthropology. And I would like to just pass on to the policymakers that anthropology as a subject needs to be prescribed right from their school days. So all educational institutions must start teaching anthropology. If we say that loss of culture is loss of identity, yes, if we know anthropology, if we bring anthropology to the grassroots level, to the masses, certainly we will not be losing our culture, because a study of anthropology tells us all about importance of culture, the relevance of our own culture, how to preserve our culture, how to promote our culture, our festivals, our days, our philosophy of life, everything is covered within one umbrella, and that's called anthropology. It's really very significant and important. I won't like to waste much of the time, because as a ritual, this message, I'm really very much fortunate that organizing committee gave me this privilege to share a few words. However, we all participants across the globe are very keen and eager to listen to today's hero, that is Professor Carlos. And so once again, I extend hearty gratitude to dear organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And let us now break the ice and get the opportunity to listen to Professor Carlos. Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to listen to me. Hello.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks.
Now it's my pleasure to invite Professor Chamali Nahalage, Head of the Department of Anthropology, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Sri Lanka, and one of our committee's advisor to address the gathering. Madam, we cannot
Madam, you are
hear you.
mute. Kindly unmute your.
Okay. Okay, good evening. Sorry about that. And first of all, like Dr. Khan said, I would like to really thank the organizing committee, the esteemed organizing committee for organizing such a like very useful event, because I think this is what we should have done long time back. But I'm really glad. I think in some way, I think this COVID situation has given us new opportunities, because this is one such way, because earlier like we didn't have this kind of international colloquiums or discussions, but now we have the opportunity to meet all, even from different continents and different countries. So it is a really nice way of connecting with people, because otherwise physically sometimes we might even not be able to go and visit all these esteemed colleagues of anthropological who do studies on anthropology, and they are reputed institutes. So, Dr. Suman, I really like to thank you for coordinating this very interesting international lecture series on historical development of anthropology subject as a discipline in Asian countries. And I also like to thank Dr. Taraka for like taking our university and our department also to your like cluster and give importance to our country as well, because we know like anthropology is a very important subject in not in all the Asian countries but the world at large, because most of the countries have a very large, like very long history, all have their own unique history with their own unique cultures and customs. But then of course what happens is sometimes due to this lack of discussions, that sometimes it's difficult for us to have good knowledge on all these different cultures. But I feel that this platform is a unique way for us to like have these discussions on the unique cultures that we can see in our own unique countries, and then to discuss it, and as Dr. Khan said, to have get to know about the cultures of our neighboring countries, and then how to preserve these cultures. Like most of these unique ones are disappearing, due to this globalization. I know it is happening in our countries also. I think so the preservation is very important for, and especially these kind of discussions are important for the preservation of these disappearing cultures. And then I think this will be a good platform for us to share our good practices on what we can do to preserve them and to look into the way forward. So I won't take much time. And also I would like to thank Professor Carlos for giving this one wonderful inaugural speech of this first day. And I'm really looking forward for his speech as well. And again, like to thank the organizing committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam. Without further delay, we are now moving to the most important event of the program today, the invited speech. The first lecture of this international lecture series will be delivered by Dr. Carlos P. Tatel, Jr., Associate Professor, Department of Anthropology, College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, University of Philippines, Diliman, Philippines. He has multidisciplinary training, having received his BA in History, BMA in Archaeology, and PhD in Anthropology, all from the same university. Currently, he is the chairperson of the Department of Anthropology and former coordinator of the Folklore Studies program. He was the host and producer of the campus-run radio program on folklore. His broad interests lie in the history of anthropology, anthropology of popular devotion, intangible cultural heritage, and applied folklore, and disaster risk management applied to heritage collections. He has written a textbook for senior high school students, focusing on the disciplines and ideas in the social sciences, and published an edited book on ethnographies of disaster based on the 2009 Anthropology Field School in TV, Albay, Philippines. Now, with much respect, I request Dr. Carol Tatel to deliver the speech on the historical development of anthropology subject as a discipline in the Philippines. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to everyone. Good evening. Thank
Good
you
afternoon,
for
sir.
the very kind introduction. But before anything else, how does how's my sound? Is it fine? Can you
Yes,
hear
yes,
me
we
Yes,
can
clearly?
it's
hear you,
It's
sir.
very
absolutely
clear.
clear, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's very clear.
So, what I did while listening to the introductions, and I'm very grateful and so pleased to meet all of you virtually. And I thank you for the invitation. And also, I'd like to mention, I would like to thank Dr. Nestor Castro because he was the link to this particular series or invitation. So while listening to the introduction, I sent Sir Dr. Suman um, a file so that you can help me share it, because this is the only the second time that I'm using Google Meet, so I'm really not familiar with the the buttons here. So if you can help me, sir, to share my file so that I won't have to worry about sharing my entire screen. If that is all right. But while sir is helping me do that, uh, yes, this is a good deal for regional anthropology. That is Asian anthropology, and this is in line with the historical, let's say this. Uh, Development of anthropology discipline in the world, and which is after more than 100 years or so of formal academic anthropology, there has now been a a plural form of anthropology. So it's now anthropologies. So it's not just one form of anthropology, because there are now national traditions of anthropology. So that is what I would like to share with you tonight, today, this afternoon, about what happened in the Philippines, in the Philippine context. A while ago, I heard that it's going to be yeah, it's ultimately this is about Asian anthropology, and it's important that we cultivate our respective national traditions in the discipline of anthropology, because this will be the building blocks of a regional anthropology. There has not been much regional studies of anthropology, um, 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 uh, looking at the looking at the discipline from a macro regional perspective, because it's so hard to do that. But we can begin by looking at our own respective national traditions. So that's what I would like to share to you. So Dr. Professor Suman, can you share for me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you very much.
I just forward your mail from my one mail to another mail, right? So that's yes. Already it has come. Now I would like to open it and we'll share it.
Yeah, and if it's not any burden to you, I will say, can you also facilitate the shifting from one slide to another if it's not too
Yes,
much
yes,
of a
definitely,
burden to you? Thank you very
definitely,
much.
definitely.
So I'm so honored to be speaking in front of you and the guests whom I believe are in the other rooms, or I don't know, maybe in the general room. So I believe there are also attendees from the Philippines as well. So, Philippines is 2.5 hours ahead of India. So, that is fine. It's not that, distant. Okay, so,
It is opening. It is opening.
oh, I will open. Oh, I'm sorry. So, is it me who should open? Can
Yes,
you help?
it is
Can,
opening. It is opening.
it is opening. All right, all right. Okay. While waiting for that file, I would like to begin by um, uh, explaining the anchor of my lecture and that is nation building, the nation. I used it as an anchor because we can do can have a lot of interpretations of the history of anthropology in every country. What I'd like to do is to use the concept of nationhood as an anchor. So I'll do this by looking at the history of anthropology, by anchoring it on the construction of a Filipino nation. And since my training is in history, this reveals my my background. I would like to look at it from historiographic point of view. So, in other words, I would attempt to periodize the process. I will not go into much detail about what happened here, what happened there, but I would like to look at the history of the discipline of anthropology in the Philippines from a historical process point of view, uh, and anchored on the idea of a nation. So, next slide, please, sir. So, just sort of introducing my topic, the photo that you are seeing is one of the most iconic colonial photographs taken during the early 1900s, circa 1912, published in the National Geographic magazine, and also included in official reports during the American colonial regime in the Philippines. And you can see there Dean C. Worcester, an important figure in colonial administration in the Philippines, U.S. colonial administration in the Philippines. He was the Secretary of Interior of the Philippine Islands. And you can see in the photo, his photo taken beside him is a Filipino Negrito. Negrito comes with the various names. It is sometimes called, sometimes depending on the location in the Philippines, sometimes this group is called Aita, sometimes Agta, sometimes and many other names. But Negrito is more of like a standard textbook name to this particular group. So you can see there in this photo what the history of anthropology in the Philippines is all about. And this is about trying to uh, know more of the other. And the other here is from the perspective of the outsider. So foreigners have been doing all this information gathering, information reporting about the Filipinos as the other. So next slide, please. So there, I see two strands in the history of anthropology in the Philippines. I see two strands. First is the concept or the phrase anthropology in the Philippines. And the second one is Philippine anthropology. For me, there are these are two different strands, and they conjure two different meanings. The first one is perspective from the outside. Since it's about the Philippines, so it's just the anthropology conducted in the Philippines. So the perspective is usually from the outside, the study of the Philippines and its peoples for the information of the outsider. You can see here the introduction of theories and methodologies of an emerging science discipline that is anthropology. Um, and the knowledge production can be understood with this question: what is out there? So from the lens of the outsider, they will ask their questions. They will ask this question: what is out there in the Philippines, in that place called the Philippines? So it's really anthropology set in this particular location, Philippines. The second one is more like appropriating anthropology as or owning, trying to get some kind of have some kind of ownership into anthropology. So it is by Filipinos, from within, from within. So the study of the Philippines is not just no longer about the location, but it's for the Filipinos, for nation building. Okay, okay. Can we have a like for nation building? So where we can see that anthropology, you can see the utilization of foreign methodologies and techniques in anthropology to counter colonial discourse on Filipinos. And then the knowledge production can be understood with this phrase or sentence: know thyself, knowing oneself. So this is consistent to the idea of various anthropological traditions in the world, wherein there's not one single anthropological tradition. There are now many national traditions, anthropologies, as we put it in plural, in the plural. Next slide, please. So as an attempt to periodize in the spirit of historiographic exercise, this is my humble attempt to periodize the history of the anthropological discipline in the Philippines. So next slide, please. The first stage, or the first period, is the period where when it is when we can see that there's formal academic anthropology is not yet available, not in the Philippines, not even in the Philippines, not even in the world. So what do we have in this period? So it is like the pre-anthropology anthropology, which we can observe all over the world. So, for example, before the 16th century, there have been many accounts about the Philippines, on the Philippines, but these accounts are are by foreigners, for example, Chinese accounts, and they've they have been mentioning the presence of various groups of Filipinos uh, and of known ethnic states such as Butuan, Sulu, Manila, Tondo, Cebu, and many others. So, is this anthropology? Is this already anthropology? Not yet, but we can see here the basis for a future modern anthropology in the Philippines. Then period two, the second period, we will witness the explosion of ethnographic accounts on the Philippines, but not as a autonomous country or nation, but as part of the Spanish Empire, or but as a Spanish colony. So the Spanish chronicles can be are were produced from the 16th century all the way to the late 19th century, and um, beginning the 19th century to the latter part of the 19th century, non-Spanish Western scientists will arrive here in the Philippines, and they will conduct their own ethnographic accounts. So what's the importance of this period? This is not yet the official academic, formal, institutionalized anthropology in the Philippines, but we can see here the explosion of information, ethnographic data, which will serve as the building blocks of future formal anthropology, and the building blocks for understanding what is out there, and understanding oneself. Okay, next slide, please. So this is what it looked like then, from the 16th century to 1850s. Um, as part of knowing what is out there, uh, and based on ethnographic studies, ethnographic accounts by travelers, by missionaries, eventually, and yes. The Philippine population was divided into three. The entire Philippine population was divided into three groups. So they are the following: the Indios, the second, the Moros, third are the Infieles. Indios come from the word India, but the Spanish colonizers came to refer to the natives of the Philippines as Indios because before they thought they were already in the India. So anyway, they refer to the entire native inhabitants of the Philippines as Indios. The second group, Moros, obviously the Muslims, which are predominant in the south and the portions uh, of northern and south and northern islands and middle islands of the Philippines. And third are the infieles, or the those that are not Christianized yet Christianized, those who are still practicing their pre-colonial religion. So the division was based on religion, but technically they are all naturales. In Spanish, it means native. They are the natives of the population. So this is not yet anthropology, but we can have a sense of anthropology here. We can have a sense of ethnology here. And the Spaniards were able to have this kind of how say this conceptualization, division of the Philippine population based on the ethnographies that they have done for the past, how many centuries already. So these general classifications we'll see later to the next period. It will be carried over. It will be carried over to the next period. So may I have the next slide, please? So before we check out the next slide, in this particular diagram, I will explain how they're able to devise the division, how they're able to conceptualize the division. So um, uh, I hope I have a pointer, but I think you can see the little triangle, blue triangle on your left, on the left. So that represents the center of the town, and they're represented by the church, represented by the complex consisting of the church, of the local colonial governance, etc. So that small bubble there is the heart of the town. But the town extends farther. By the way, the town in Spanish is called pueblo. Pueblo is a town. So uh, across all over the Philippine Islands, there have been many pueblos erected, established by the Spanish colonial regime. So the unique characteristic of these pueblos is that they have town plazas, and sometimes they have walls around them. So anyway, the pueblo extends far beyond the center. So as you can see in the green bubble, okay, can you see the green bubble? So that's the how to say this, the physical boundary of the town. So the nearer you are to the center, the stronger the presence of Spanish governance. The farther you are to the center, the weaker the presence of Spanish governance. To put it in idiomatically, uh, this particular phrase is useful. Bajo de la campana. It means under the bell, under the bell. So literally and figuratively, if you hear the sound, you know, if can hear it very strongly, hit very loudly, so most likely you are near the center. But if the sound is already very weak, then that's the indication that you are very far from the center. So what happens now if you can no longer hear the sound of the bell? So you are most probably on the border of the town, between the town and, you know, that place where Spanish colonial power is no longer felt. So hence the orange triangle there, the visita, is, it means a little church where the priest visits only once a year. But beyond the visita are the infieles, the non-Christianized, uh, non-Christianized groups who are still practicing their old cultures, you know, pre-colonial cultures, traditions, even religions. Hence, the Spanish called them infieles. So, so that's how they get to divide the population. And then the third one are the Moros, because the Moros are they have their own way, they have their own system, and somewhat the Moros somewhat coexisted with the Spanish colonial power, because they can not really conquer the Moros. So the Moros coexisted, especially those that are found in the south, in Mindanao. If you've heard of that island, Mindanao, the stronghold of the Moros. So there you go. You have three groups of the Philippines, and this is established by ethnology, by ethnography, and the information that they got from the ground. May I have the next slide, please? Show the next slide. So onwards to the third period, where we can see that anthropology, ethnology, archaeology, linguistics, and folklore, all autonomous, independent disciplines, but interrelated. Interrelated. In fact, it has a history of its own. Why in the U.S. tradition, they are all included under one umbrella that is known as four fields anthropology. But it's a different. It has a story of its own. Let's just say that all these independent disciplines, all these independent yet interrelated disciplines, um, entered the Philippines around the circa 1850s to 1890s. So, and this coincided with the period of the emergence of formal, academic, institutionalized anthropological discipline in Europe. So, as early as 1850s all the way to 1890s, the entry of anthropology, ethnology, as well as archaeology, linguistics, and folklore entered the Philippines. Entered the Philippines. So the reports, accounts, publications that have been produced during that time by the author, by the Western visitors and scientists, although they are for the benefit of Europe, for the benefit of Western academia, they also contributed uh, to the idea of knowing what is out there in the Philippines. But let me put it this way: they resulted into two different, or they had two different results. One, the perspective of the outsider. The second one is the perspective of the insider. Let's start with the perspective of the outsider. Yes, the anthropology, ethnology, and other disciplines entered the Philippines. But if you notice, they are only for the utilization of Western academia. It's not for the utilization of the Philippines. Or we can also say that it's not for uh, it's not directly for the benefit of the Filipinos, but it's for the benefit of the competing museums in Europe. For example, German scientists, French scientists, explorers, English ethnologists will come to the Philippines between 1850s and 1890s, and they will gather all sorts of data, linguistic, anthropological, referring to human bones, human data, uh, archaeology, folklore, ethnology. They will do all these things, but will send the report back to their managers, back to their employers. That is the museums located in Western Europe. Okay. On the other hand, the Filipinos found a way to maximize the scientific discipline that has just entered the Philippine Islands. So the Filipinos that I'm talking about are the educated ones, the enlightened ones, and incidentally, there are also the activists during that time, because they clamor for independence, they clamor for reforms, so they needed to have a scientific basis for clamoring, justifying their claims, uh, 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 of establishing an independent Philippine nation. So the data, this is for the project of nationhood. So we can see here the difference. First is the data was used by the West for their own benefit about the Philippines. The second one's the data used by Filipinos, educated Filipinos, for the benefit of their own political agenda. And that is to establish an independent nation. So the method is the same, positivist, using standard anthropological methods, comparative method in ethnology. They will use the same tenets of emerging anthropological discipline, but the objectives were different. Okay, so but as suggested by these two circles, the outsider's objective and the insider's objective will intersect. So we are now interested with the intersection because this particular intersection will be carried over to the next period, and that is the period of American colonialism in the Philippines from 1900s to early 1930s. May we show the next slide, please? So before we go to the fourth stage, this is an example of what I said earlier, by European scientists, European professionals, museum professionals, visiting the Philippines to gather data. For what? For whom? To bring back to Europe, to send back to their employers, museums. So the picture is of a French science museum personnel from employed by Musée de l'Homme in Paris. He was Alfred Marsh. He arrived in the Philippines between circa 1880s, toured Luzon in Visayas and probably Mindanao for about 2 years, and collected data, human data, flora and fauna, and send them all back, objects, send them all back to his museum. And until now, the data that he collected can still be found in the said museum, Musée de l'Homme in Paris. Next slide. So we now go to the fourth period, and the point one. There will be four stages of this period. So what happened when the Americans arrived? So what happened generally? One, they will carry over what has already been established during the 19th century. Carry over what? Carry over the scientific data that has already been established 50 years before they arrived. Okay. Number two, they will apply their own style of anthropological tradition, their own anthropological tradition as developed in the US. Remember that during this time, 1899 to 1930s, formal institutionalized academic anthropology in the US was still in its incipient stage. It's still developing, and they are indebted to Franz Boas, a German, by birth, who established the first department of anthropology in the U.S. In Columbia University, Franz Boas, and he mentored many American anthropologists. So the Philippines became the Americans. How to say this? Maybe we can say call it their playground. The Philippines became the American anthropologist site of testing their theories, testing their methods. So, and the scientific data 50 years before them is not so much different from what they would try to um, operationalize in the Philippines when they arrived. So, for instance, remember the three divisions. Remember the three divisions in Spanish: naturales, infieles, and moros. So they will be retained by the Americans, only with a different name, of course, English. Okay? So the naturales, since they are Christianized, they are from the lowland, so they will be known as the Christians. Okay? And the infieles, because they are the ones found in the mountains, they will be known in the American era anthropological literature as the pagan tribes, or the mountain peoples, or the highland tribes, hill tribes. So they will no longer be called infieles, but mountain peoples. And then the Moros will be known as the Mohammedans, or Muslims, but Mohammedans in the American anthropological literature. So this is not so different from 50 years, before. Uh, only that the labels changed from Spanish to English. But maybe if I can just cite one very important effect of this, or of impact of or effect of this stage, is this: that the Americans sort of simplified the classification by just dividing the entire population into two. What is that? The population divided into the Christians and the non-Christians. That's the simple way of understanding the peoples of the Philippines. So in some literature, it is called the bifurcation, the dividing into two of the entire population. How are they able to get this kind of conceptualization? Of course, by using anthropological, ethnological, folkloric, archaeological data from the 19th century, and from their own data gathering when they arrived in the Philippines. Next slide, please. So maybe you caught that in the previous slide, but I do not want to go back to that slide anymore. That the anchor of the Americans in their anthropological field work, research, etc., is the concept of race. That's why a lot of their researches, field work reports, etc., had been informed by this concept of race. So may I continue with the second part of period number 4, wherein uh, the scientific data have been um utilized to come up with uh, some sort of an ethnic museum wherein they can display the Filipinos before the rest of the world, like they are a living museum of some sort. I'm sure that you have heard of the 1904 St. Louis Exposition. You've heard of the other expositions uh, representing various peoples of the world. So 1904 St. Louis Exposition is important in the history of Philippine anthropology because this is where um, the Filipinos were brought to the United States to perform as themselves, and so because of this performance, because of this event, many Americans um, got acquainted to the to the peoples of the American colony that is the Philippine Islands. This was their first encounter. Most Americans, the American public, this was their first face to face, if I may use the word. This was their first face to face encounter of the peoples of the Philippines, because the Filipinos, various groups of Filipinos were brought to the United States to perform in this particular uh, exposition. So, who were responsible for helping uh, the business interest? Who were responsible for assisting the colonial government in 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 um, in showcasing the Philippines to the world? None other than the anthropologists and ethnologists. They were the ones who who helped the colonial government as well as the business industry in coming up with an ethnic museum. So anthropology at in this stage became the handmaid of colonialism, became the handmaid of exoticizing colonial subjects. Next slide, please. Next, Professor Suman. Next slide, please. Is it already okay? So just to show you some pictures of that exposition, this is one of the examples of the flyers, and many more photos all over the internet are now available. So next slide. Okay. For the third part of period, the fourth period, uh, what I would like to say is that anthropology, ethnology, folklore became the instrument for civilization and integration. Remember, the Americans simply copied, carried over what has already been established 50 years before they arrived. So they used this modern institution-based professional anthropology in civilizing, what they call civilizing efforts and integration of the various groups in the Philippines into one citizenship, that is being a resident of the Philippine Islands. So there are many examples: the colonial government, the civilizing missions, the policy of integration, even the social engineering efforts of Dr. David Barrows. Dr. David Barrows was the Secretary of Education in the early 1900s. You know what? He had a training in anthropology. He held a PhD in anthropology when he before he so he's very I would say this maybe that's the reason why he was chosen. He was sent to the Philippines because of his having a doctorate in anthropology. So he was sent to the Philippine Islands to assist the American colonial regime in the civilizing programs, what they call civilizing programs, and integration of various groups as one, citizenship. But of course, following their uh, two-part category of Filipinos, the Christians and the non-Christians. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this is just another way of elucidating, demonstrating in some detail what I've been trying to say in this part. So the names Guthe, Bayer, Fansler, Craig, Garvan, they all came to the Philippine Islands in various points in time between 1900s up to 1930s, but they are all academics. They are all either ethnologists or anthropologists or folklorists or linguistic anthropologists. Um, they all came to the Philippines to do their respective uh, field work projects. For instance, Bayer, it sounds rings a bell as far as the Filipinos are concerned because Henry Otley Bayer first saw the Philippine exposition, World Exposition, when he was still a kid. And he was still a kid. So he was inspired, and so he signed up. He's a geologist, and he signed up. He was sent to the Philippines and studied mountain peoples. And then later on, he was assigned by the American colonial government to Manila, to Manila, to teach anthropology in the University of the Philippines. And in 1917, he chaired the first department of anthropology in the Philippines at the University of the Philippines. And the Department of Anthropology in the University of the Philippines is the first academic level department of anthropology in the Philippines and one of the oldest departments of anthropology in Asia. So Bayer rings a bell to us, especially Filipinos, because of him being the founder of the Department of Anthropology. Okay, what else? Goethe is an archaeologist. Fansler is a folklorist. Craig is a historian. Garvan is an ethnologist. So, all these various trainings of Americans um, doing their field work and producing knowledge about the Philippines. Okay, next slide. So just to recap the names that I've mentioned so far, David Barrows, he was the first head of the Bureau of Non-Christian Tribes, the so-called Highlanders. He was responsible for studying them, and he eventually became the Secretary of Education. Albert Jenks, he was the he was the head of the ethnological survey of the Philippines. And Daniel Folkmar, I mentioned earlier, H. O. T. Bayer, Faye Cooper Cole, Felix Keesing, Dean Worcester. Remember the photo that I've shown you in the very first slides? He is a zoology. He was a zoologist by training, had a PhD in zoology, but was attracted to cultures, topology, and all that, and dabbled with many things in his life, like business, government work, photography, many other things. Dean Fansler, a folklorist, John Garvan, etc. Next slide. And this is a photo of one of the many photos of H. Otley Bayer, the founder of my department, the anthropology department in the University of the Philippines. And he had his own personal Institute of Museology and Ethnology, which was well known all over Indo-Pacific region. It was then known as not yet Southeast Asia, but Indo-Pacific region. So those any academic researcher in the world interested in the archaeology, anthropology of Indo-Pacific should meet Henry Otley Bayer, and they must study under him at the University of the Philippines. Just a footnote. One of the founders, important icons of Chinese anthropology, who founded Chinese anthropology in mainland China, studied under Bayer in the 1920s, got his master's in anthropology at the University of the Philippines. And in the 1930s, I think 1930s, Bayer headed the regional meet of anthropology archaeology in the Indo-Pacific region. Indo-Pacific region. What happened to his museum after he died in 1960s? This was broken up into many owners, given to many. So a portion was left to the Department of Anthropology at the University of the Philippines. Others were bought by the Australian National Library. So so that's the story of and he passed away in the late 1960s. So spanning 30 years of 30 to 40 years of service at the University of the Philippines, being the chairman of the department for about 40 years. 40 years. So you can just imagine the influence that he has had in younger colleagues as well as foreigners. Okay, so next slide. So I'm nearing the end of my presentation. We are already in part 5. So after the admittedly those 4 to 5 years of Japanese occupation is considered a gap in history of anthropology in the Philippines, because we do not have much information about what happened during these 4 or 5 years. But we can say that Bayer's friendship with a military officer, and at the same time ethnologist, well-known ethnologist in Japan, because of Henry Otley Bayer's friendship with that Japanese ethnologist slash military officer, uh, his museum was left intact, and so we can assume that anthropology, ethnology continued even during those critical 4 or 5 years. But we don't know much info, and still a gap in the history of Philippine anthropology. So the key here is to really link with Japanese anthropologists, because this is the Philippine. We can say that this is the Philippine aspect of the history of Japanese anthropology, or we can say that this is the Japanese aspect of Philippine anthropology. But anyway, after the war, so right after the war, the key positions are still being held by Americans, but not long after. The Filipinos who have been sent to abroad to specialize in anthropology came back, and they all came back one after another. One after another. Most of them studied in the US as part of the Philippine Studies program of the University of Chicago. Others were trained in other, like Cornell, others in Europe. But the point here is this: they are almost of the same generation. They all saw the war as young kids, and almost all of them finished college in the late 1950s, and most of them earned their degrees, PhDs, in the late 1960s. Therefore, their impact will be in the late 1960s and 70s. That will explain why 1970s period was really a critical time and a very exciting time for Philippine anthropology in the Philippines. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The names. I cannot miss this because they are important names in Philippine anthropology. Arsenio Manuel. His story is very interesting. He was born in 1909. So he was one of the first students of Bayer. He saw the pre-war um, pre-war stage of Philippine anthropology. He also witnessed the post-war, post-colonial phase of Philippine anthropology. And Arsenio Manuel was a very prolific writer. So he passed away in the in the early 2000s. So he covered like 60, 70, 80 years of, you know, 80 years, almost 80 years of anthropology. Now, F. Landa Hocano is another interesting story. He's very prolific, and he started pioneering articles, writing articles in many different fields of anthropology, never before taken up by anthropologists before him. Like, for example, Filipino values, engagement with private sector, education, and all that. Mario Zamora, and this he's quite interesting because he got his PhD in Cornell, and his PhD topic, research in one of the villages in India. And during his professional career, he made friends. He had strong affiliations with Indian academia, um, and so it's quite rare for a Filipino to do research outside of the Philippines. It's one of those first Filipinos who who did research outside of the Philippines. So in fact, just a footnote. When I went to India to talk about about the history of anthropology, etc., I was in um, I was in the state of Bihar. I was delivering a lecture, and then there were guests from many and universities in India, particularly in Calcutta, etc. So they told me that they know Mario Zamora. The old people there, the old professors there said they knew Mario Zamora. Unfortunately, Mario Zamora died quite early, only in his 60s. So that's an indication, that's proof that a Filipino academic was able to establish network with colleagues in anthropologist colleagues in India. And finally, Sue Salazar, he got his PhD in Europe, France, and he did his research in Oceania, about Oceania. So it's also quite rare because Sue Salazar's research is cross comparative. It doesn't focus on just one place, but multiple places. Multiple places because he was after a concept, trying to survey them all across the Indo-Pacific region, or what we call now Oceania. So anyway, these very important personalities trained generations of Filipino anthropologists, ethnologists, archaeologists, which will impact Philippine anthropology for many years, succeeding years. Next slide. I'm about to wrap up. Some turning points focus on some turning points during this 1960s, 1970s. Remember what I told you earlier. During the colonial period, the focus was on highlanders, the mountain peoples, the exotic, the objectifying the mountain peoples, and looking at them, seeing them as exotic, peoples. Now, the focus is on Christian lowland Filipinos. So that's a turning point, clear a turning point. And there's attention to urban cultures and settlements, arguing that anthropologists, ethnologists, folklorists should also try to understand urban cultures and settlements, not just the agrarian villages. And also to strengthen the pillars of the discipline. We saw now the flowering, the strengthening of the pillars of the discipline, such as the following. First, the degree programs have flowered. They have multiplied degree programs. Second, the establishment of academic journals. Third is the establishment of specialized museums or collections. And fourth is the establishment of professional organizations, be it a student organization or a professional organization. So finally, the engagement with the public, media, NGOs, foreign organizations, corporations, etc. Okay, next slide. We now turn to uh, uh, Now this is crucial. This is crucial. I'm about to wrap up, but this is crucial because when we reach 1970s, the story of Philippine anthropology will shift. It will become colorful, to put it that way. Um, um, it was during the time of President Marcos, where he had this vision of new society, new Philippines, and so he tapped the expertise, he tapped the knowledge, skills of anthropologists in helping him conceptualize that Philippine village, or in Tagalog, in Philippine language, we call it Nayong Pilipino. So you can see that the two classifications remained, the Christian, non-Christians, okay, but labeled in another way. Labeled in another way. The Christians will be known as the majority. The non-Christians will be called minority. And the Muslims will still be Muslims. So you can see that the original two classifications, three groups, classification of the Spaniards will be carried over to the 1900s all the way to the 1970s with a little with a twist, instead of saying Christians, you say majority. Instead of saying non-Christians, you say minority. Okay, next slide. So this is an example of Nayong Filipino. Um, uh, some say that this approach is a pioneer, not only in the Philippines, but also for the rest of the world, I think. Lee Kuan Yew once said that he tried to copy what Marcos was doing in the Philippines, and one of them is to copy the idea of having a representative representative showcase in one place, representing your entire nation, representing your entire nation. You will have the same I'll say this same entity in Indonesia. Wherein there's an attraction. It's like an attraction. You go to this attraction, and you will see the entire country in one place. So you have these iconic places in the Philippines, miniaturized, or how to say this, life size or something, but placed in one, uh, how to say this, located in one place. So this is like a showcase of the entire country. Next slide, please. And of course, the National Geographic magazine. Um, the first photo, remember, Dean Worcester, it was published by National Geographic. And now, after 70 years, another National Geographic photo will come out. And this is about the Tasadai, the controversial Tasadai, uh, whom the international media called the Stone Age people found in the rainforests of Mindanao. This is a story. It has a story of its own. It endured many debates. So let's just say that they have long since been established as hoax. But the people are real. But the idea that the claim that they are Stone Age people is said to be a hoax. So I included it because this is one example of how the Marcos regime was tapped anthropological knowledge, archaeological knowledge in justifying their vision of Philippine village. Next slide. So just to continue the story, that in the 1980s, year 2000, same Muslims, but now anthropologists, ethnologists are looking at peace and conflict resolution, more looking at culture, and the infieles, which were labeled as mountain peoples during the American period are now referred to as indigenous peoples, and the majority uh, blossomed into many topics like gender sexuality, health, justice, poverty, and many other things. Things that anthropologists do not normally study 100 years ago, but now anthropologists are researching on. So that's where you can see the shift also. It's a shift away from exotic peoples, a shift away from essentializing groups of people, a shift away from the usual bifurcated population, a shift away from the usual, tripartite, conceptualization of the peoples of the Philippines, but more of an issue-based anthropology. The anthropologists nowadays are into, universal, issues like human rights, gender, sexuality, justice, poverty, and all that. Next slide, and probably the last. Next slide. So yeah, continuation, like a continuation. Next slide. Next slide. So this is in 1992. This is a landmark when the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples was 1997 was established as prescribed by the law on indigenous peoples. It is said that the law on indigenous peoples in the Philippines was one of the first laws in the world to have a special law on indigenous peoples. So it's very special. So next slide. And you can see here in the bubble how topics are carried over to the next and the next, but new topics come in and intersections of old and new topics. And in 2017, we marked our centennial, and we marked it by having our own, but by holding an international conference. Too bad that we only met now. Had we had this kind of discussion or meeting, I could have invited you to the said international conference. And next slide. And this is my way of ending. This is the last slide in my way of ending. There's now a special school catered to the indigenous peoples of the Philippines, where they are taught. I got it from their website. It's the Center for Indigenous Peoples Education. The aim is to provide appropriate and relevant trainings and formation for indigenous peoples, youth, children, community leaders, and development workers. It envisioned to develop empowered leaders uh, and development workers committed to the task of building sustainable communities and promoting the IP rights to life, land, self-government, and cultural integrity. So this is a special program under the University of Southeastern Philippines. So the indigenous peoples will get a degree, and most of them will go back to their communities and serve as development workers, professionals. Some of them will will how to say this train in anthropology. So my way of ending is this: anthropology in the Philippines started as the othering of the Filipinos, and this Pamulaan school sort of changed that. So there's it's no longer othering by the the people who was considered the other are now anthropologists themselves. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. They are now anthropologists themselves, and they are in charge of their own knowledge production. They are in charge of their own knowledge production. They are in charge of their own knowing thyself. It's no longer the foreigners whom we look up to tell us what are we, but it is the indigenous peoples, Filipinos themselves, who do this important work of knowing oneself. With that, I'd like to end my lecture. Sorry, it's quite long, as characteristic of any historical survey. I hope you understand.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for the very informative and interesting talk. It's really full of knowledge, not just about the history and development of anthropology in Philippines, but it also gave insight into the Philippines as a country and its people and their cultural history as well. Thank you so much for that. Now the discussion is off. Now the time for the discussion. Any questions from the audience?
Yes. Dr. Tharaka, thank you very much for your moderation. And also, I would like to give my sincere thanks to Dr. Carlos Jr. Tatel. Actually, he said brilliantly regarding the historical development of anthropology in Philippines. And the most important part of his talk is to the organization of the slides, how he organized the slides. That is very, very important for us to learn from him. So before we proceed to question answer session, I would like to, I am extremely happy and I would like to announce that we have now in our platform with Professor Yunita Intaro. Professor Yunita Intaro from Indonesia. And I always believe that she's one of the greatest anthropologists in Asian countries and in Indonesia too. So we are happy that Professor Yunita joined, and she will deliver the lecture in 25th of August. And I requested her to join if she get the time. So extremely we are happy, Madam Professor Yunita. So yes, thank you very much, Madam. Thank you very much. And Professor Yunita is one of the inspiration for us. That she is one of the legend in Indonesian anthropology. She established the anthropology in Indonesia. So when I read this topic in internet near about 3 years back, so I just astonished, I just motivated how she paced the anthropology in Indonesia after coming from Cambodia, I think so. So that's important, and she is one of the important source person for us in future. Anyway, so today we are, yes, thank you, Madam. Today we are with Philippines. So before we going to the any questions, so it is my duty that what is the motto of this organizing this topic, that is historical development of anthropology as a discipline in Asia. As you know that each and every nation in Asia have its own background, right? Have its own background, and as a student of anthropology in the Indian continent, when we study mainly for Indian continent things, from Indian universities or from Sri Lanka universities, so we are very hardly, we incorporate the anthropological traditions of our neighboring nations, specifically the Asian countries. Now, what the important things we have to note from Dr. Carlos' lecture, that is the influence of colonizations is very important. Now, historically throughout Asia, there is the influence of colonization is important. So next, the important thing is that the indigenous, the commissions. So only in Philippines, right? So far as my knowledge goes, the Philippines only the country who have formed the indigenous commissions, I think so, in Asia. So they adopt the indigenous declaration of indigenous rights, and they are working very, very, very hard. And they established the commission in 1997. And thirdly, another important thing is that whether just few days back I have tried to search whether there is any link work have been done yet in between the India and Philippines, and I got the work of the Professor Hamendrop. No, Professor Hamendrop, he worked a very good work he has done during 1980s, I think, and he said that there is a similarities of the material culture, the Naga population and the highland tribal or indigenous population in the Philippines. Now, Philippines is a very important area of the anthropological tradition. I have learned a lot from Professor Carlos, and it is just opened my eyes that they have very strong tradition of the anthropology, not only after their independence, but also before independence during the colonial era. Now, this floor is open for the discussion, and I would like to just start the one question to Professor Carlos, that it is my own curiosity that how much anthropological students are getting chance in National Commission of Indigenous People, the organization. Is there any, they are getting any preference to get the job or not?
Okay, I'll try my best to answer the question. Sometimes the audio is not clear, but I think I got the question. So, as prescribed by the policy of that commission, so the preference is to employ indigenous peoples, I think. So, so that's the preference, to employ indigenous peoples. But you know, as any agency, private government agency, the the operation evolves, keeps on developing. It's a work in progress. It's not a perfect agency, but as you said, Professor Suman, they're working their very best to serve, to discharge their function as mandated by the law. So it's not a perfect agency, but that they're working to discharge their function. So the preference is indigenous peoples, but I think they also employ non-indigenous peoples. I think so. And by the way, the question and answer portion is you know I want to learn from you too. I want to learn from every one of you, because I only look at the Philippines, but I'm really curious about what's going on all over Asia. So I'm so thrilled to know that this will have many parts after this, because I would like to know what's going on around in Asia.
We are planning to organize, as it is an international lecture series, we are planning to organize this talk in every week. So we already formulated our future program, that is 18 from Malaysia and 25th from Indonesia. So after that, yes, the people, the anthropologists, the eminent anthropologists, they will come. They will deliver, and that platform, I think this is the beginning of the interactions, because when 15 to 16 countries, when they'll deliver the lecture, the historical development of anthropology, then I think new knowledge will gain. New knowledge will gain in comparative basis, I think. So this is my motto to organize. This is our motto to organize this long-term lecture series, and hopefully we will succeed, and we need the blessings of all the seniors of the anthropologists, and also the well wishers. Now I would like to where Dr. Tharaka, I would like to give this platform to Dr. Tharaka. I think Joram Lee. I don't know she or he raised her hand. So, is there any question for her?
Yes. Joram.
Dr. Tharaka, kindly proceed.
Yes, Joram, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Just okay.
Okay.
Is there anyone
Anybody?
who yes? Any questions? If you have any questions, you can put in the message box as well.
Is there any questions? Dr. Suchishmita Senchuduri, any comments?
No more questions, sir. Even in the
Kindly think. Why I am insisting the participants specifically from India and our academic colleagues, those who are from India, because we never heard any this kind of lecture from an anthropologist from Philippines, right?
Right.
So from our students also, if they need, if they raise any question, then they will, I think they will learn a lot from Dr. Carlos and from others. So before I go into the any other questions, I kindly convey my greetings to Dr. Carlos, convey greetings to Dr. Nastro Castro, Professor Nastro Castro, as because initially, yes. Any question? Abhishek Bhumik?
Abhishek Bomb. One question is there in the message box. Geographically, Philippines is a land of much importance. The lowest point of the earth is at Manila Trench in Pacific. How particularly the geographical context of associated Oceania, Micronesia have enriched the vicinity of the Filipino islas and the descendants of culture practices. That is the question. Carol, sir, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
Shall I
also
repeat?
yes.
Yeah,
I'm also trying to follow the question by reading
okay.
by
You can see
reading
that.
by
Yes,
reading
sir.
the chat
Okay,
box.
sir.
So the question is about okay. Okay, maybe it's the question is about the how the environment has shaped
Yes,
the cultural
cultural
practices.
practices.
Yes, I think that's the theme, the spirit of the question. So not only using the example of the Philippines, but it is quite uh, um, understood all over the world that the environment somewhat the environment really impacts the way people think, do live their lives, and look at the world around them. So in the Philippines, we have many volcanoes because and fault lines because we are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. So we experience many rumblings of the ground, earthquakes, ground shaking, earthquakes. So the impact to culture is that Filipinos um, integrated that environmental facts of life into their indigenous knowledge and practices, into their folklore. So um, they trying to make sense of the world around them by having all these many stories about uh, um, earthquake, volcanic eruptions, typhoons, but explained or narrated in a language that is comprehensible to the people. And as anthropologists, we know that uh, people, human beings, um, try to comprehend the world by uh, packaging packaging these experiences in the form of stories. and in these stories, uh, they teach lessons. They remember the past. They recognize the values, and they also try to warn people. So that's how the environment has shaped the Filipino cultural practices and the way at looking at the world around them, the worldview, as they say. So it's all found in the stories, folklore, and indigenous knowledge and practices.
Thank you very much, sir. I think Abhishek got the correct answer for the question. Is there any concerns or questions?
Now, Dr. Tharaka,
Yes,
just one question is roaming in my mind
Mhm.
to Dr. Carlos, that is there any major constraints for anthropologists and anthropology department in Philippines for the future growth?
Professor Sumi said, is there any
Constraints? Is there any constraints, or is there any mm,
constraints?
yes, yes,
Stumbling blocks, constraints. Okay,
yes, yes, yes,
constraints. Oh
yes,
yes, there are so many constraints.
yes.
We can begin by talking about the. We can start actually with the theories that we use, the the concepts that we use, because being a this anthropology discipline, um, we it was I do not want to use the word given to us, but uh, it entered the Philippines through the West. So it's one of those many disciplines that's not that is developed in the West outside, and then made part of Philippine local national education. So um, that alone, we have a quite a problem, because you will be forced to use concepts, ideas, theories that that are developed in Western context, and you want to try your very best to apply that in the local setting. So the challenge is to come up with your own. So like what Zeus Salazar, the eminent Filipino historian, ethnologist that I showed a while ago, he was espousing for a perspective from within, so that it's not as if you will dismiss the methods of anthropology and science of anthropology, because it's already an established science. You can not dismiss it. What you want to do is to apply that science, use the same method to develop your own way of interpretation, and not just use the finished product theory and just look for data here. So what you want to do is your theory to come from the ground, but still you are how to say, aligned with the international standards science of anthropological discipline. So the method is the same, but interpretation must come from what the local context is trying to tell, what the local data is trying to tell you. So that's the first constraint. How to get out of this how to get out of this mentality. The second constraint are more like practical constraints, like you me are experiencing in the context of college or university of academe. We want we hope to have uh, more, enough funding. We hope to build more networks. We hope to have more support from the state, from the government. We want to engage the public more. So we want all these things, and we want the people to appreciate our profession. Maybe that's the one of the most important things. We want the public to appreciate what we can do for the nation. That our profession, our discipline, is not just a waste of time, but will really have practical, important, uh, um, practical and important implications in in our lives, So so and many other constraints. Not to mention the constraints within the academy itself. Within the academy itself.
So why I am asking these questions is because we are not only trying to understand the historical development, but also as a discipline, how anthropology is going on in the nation. That is also the important aspects for our understanding. Now, my last question is that you are from the Department of Anthropology, the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy. Now, University of Philippines. Now, is there any link or is there any cause behind it to put the Department of Anthropology in the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy? So this is the my curiosity actually. I want to understand
Right.
why Department of Anthropology is putting in the College of Social Sciences and specifically in philosophy. You know that in Malaysia, there's a department of anthropology and psychology. In Indonesia, you know that there's a department of anthropology and political sciences.
Right.
So,
Right. Interesting.
so that's things are roaming in my mind. So that's why I'm questioning
Yeah.
this. I
Yeah.
don't know is it true or not. That's
Right.
why.
Actually, for every university, college, or whatever, the the story behind labels, the story behind each and every department's location within the scheme of things in the academe, they have their own stories. They have their own backgrounds. Maybe it's the agenda of the university. Maybe it's just some practical considerations. But in my case, it is because of course there's a practical consideration. You'll be placed with this department and that department, etc. But aside from that is the idea that we recognize anthropology as more inclined to the social, more inclined to the social, but also anchored on the physical. Uh, Before the present college was established, the old name of the college is College of Arts and Sciences, and this was changed in the 1980s into College of Social Sciences because the old College of Arts and Sciences split into three: Arts and Letters, College of Science, College of Social Sciences and Philosophy. So what I'm saying is during the time that it was still part of the arts and sciences, you can have a sense that anthropology, based on the evidence that I saw in my research, anthropology uh, uh, dabbles between biological and social. In fact, for a college student who wishes to enter medical school, uh, they can take anthropology because it's considered a pre-medical course. But if he or she wishes to enter law, College of Law, he can also take anthropology because it's considered a social, science course. So anthropology enjoys that kind of identity, enjoys that kind of position of having these two major fields as part of its identity, being a humanistic and social science discipline and a physical biological discipline. A famous anthropologist once said that the anthropology is the most humanistic of all the sciences and the most scientific of all the humanities. So until now,
As
anthropology,
Whoever said, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, progress.
Yes. So until now, anthropology, even in my context, in my university, enjoys that kind of reputation. So we have social, cultural engagements, but we also, and we have museums. We maintain museums and all that. But we also have our laboratory, you know, osteological, bones, human bones laboratory. So we maintain that kind of identity and position. So yeah, in the spirit of using the word asking questions, I'm very curious, because when I was about Indian anthropology, if I may ask a question to my Indian Sri Lankan colleagues, uh, because when I was doing my research in the history of anthropology in the Philippines, um, uh, I encountered this question in my mind. I had this question in my mind. Which which department of anthropology can be considered the oldest in Asia? Remember that remember that the Department of Anthropology in UP was established in 1917. So how about in India? I thought maybe your departments are older, or is it younger? It's a question in my mind that I had many years ago, but didn't have the opportunity
Thank you
to
very much.
ask.
Thank you very much,
Yes,
Carlos.
yes. I'd
Thank
like to
you
be
very much.
enlightened.
Yes. Dr. Tharaka, is there
Yes.
any question? Or
No, sir,
you
not
can
in the
you can
next
proceed
session.
for vote of thanks.
Yes. Sir, there is a question from the council. Sir, I think in our Sri Lanka,
Yes.
the Department of Anthropology of the University of Sri Jayewardenepura was the very first anthropology department that established in our country, and it was established in 1961. 1961. Okay.
96.
But
Okay, then,
in Calcutta
yeah.
University, it was established in 1920. That is the oldest one.
Oh, this one, yes.
Sir wanted to know this, I think.
Yes.
Now we are
Okay,
running
thank you.
100 years. We are celebrating 100 years
So,
of
so
anthropology.
it
Wow.
will be very interesting. It will be very much interesting after getting the knowledge of the historical understanding of anthropology throughout Asian nation, right? So you can easily put which country that is the started first the Department of Anthropology in what sense. That is very, very important for our understanding too. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all. And as there is no any questions, I would like to move
Professor
to the next. Yes,
Suman, Baraka,
yes,
I have one quick question, if you
yes,
don't
yes,
mind.
of course.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Professor Dr. Tatel. Yeah, I was just interested about public engagement constraints in relation to engaging Filipinos, yet interested to and be involved with anthropology. Now, I understand this is a constraint. What sort of approach do we have in mind to address this issue? And yeah, I'm just interested to know what sort of approaches do we have a plan or in mind, and so that we can address these constraints and see through the that anthropology would pair with other disciplines that are really popular sciences disciplines.
Yeah, thank you for
Tatel?
that. Yes, thank you for that question. I guess you said it um, rightly when you mentioned pairing. So nowadays it's no longer one discipline will solve everything. It has to be a discipline interacting, engaging, um, collaborating with another discipline, cross cultural, or many disciplines, multidisciplinary. So gone are the days that the health sciences are just talking with their fellow health scientists, or social scientists are just having a conversation with their fellow social scientists. It's now social scientists talking with the health professionals and vice versa, and and we can have many trainings. We can have we can be trained in many different disciplines, and I'm proud to say that anthropology is one of those. I'm sure you will agree, my fellow anthropologists here. I will agree that anthropology is one of those, flexible disciplines and accommodating in the sense that we can be, um we can contribute a lot to enrich other disciplines. In my department, we are so used to having students who enter our graduate programs. They come from various disciplines. Some are in the mass communications field. Some are doctors. Some are lawyers. Some are engineers. Some are musicians. Some are they see anthropology as another lens, so they can enrich their field, their profession, their uh, their existing engagements. So, and the challenge for anthropologists who are trained in anthropology is also to train in other fields so that they can uh, get acquainted with other professions and other fields. So we collaborate. So yes, it's a constraint, but by it's constraint in the sense that people are not yet familiar with collaboration and network disciplines, but with the good promotion and uh, and improving the level of education in the basic education and in tertiary education, we can produce students who are multidisciplinary in their approach than how to say this, students who are myopic in the sense that they see only a small specialized portion, but more of a person or student who appreciates interconnections. So thank you very much, Miss Josephine Escaño, for the question and for opening this issue.
Thank you very much for the question and
Yeah,
answer.
just a follow up. Just
Now
a
we have,
follow up.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Just a follow up. Just a follow up question. And this is you
okay.
answer if you know. But I'm just interested to know what sort of activities or plan does the whole anthropology, the area of anthropology has in response to pandemic. As we all know, we are all subjected to the same issue, which is pandemic, and it's very present, a present challenge to all of us. So, given that that is the issue at the minute, what is the area of anthropology doing in, say, and contribute? I mean, what are the contributions? What are the activities they are actually doing to at least assist or help um in the pandemic in whatever way? I know that's not the sciences, and it's all the science that dealing with at the moment because of all the case numbers and all of that. But knowing, as you have said, to follow up with your answer, that it's interconnected, all of us, all disciplines has in a way contribution in the society. So I'm just interested to know what sort of contribution or what the this discipline had in mind to address or at least to assist in the or what their role in the pandemic.
Yes, I will provide my answer, but I hope my anthropologist colleagues in Indonesia and Sri Lanka can also help me out here or contribute, because I'm sure we can learn a lot from them too. But in the case of the Philippines, you can see anthropologists are in the case of the Philippines, anthropologists are at the forefront of understanding the impact, the human impact of I mean the social cultural impact of this pandemic. So it's not just we by now we more than a year into the pandemic. By now we understand that this is not just an exclusive biological problem. It's not even an exclusive genetic issue, but this is also a human issue, a social issue, because pandemics they do not come out of the blue. They are a combination of physical, biological factors, as well as human, sociological, cultural factors. Because we're talking here of human settlements, we're talking here of people encroaching the forest, animal kingdom, and people have been doing all these activities that shape even the environment. So the anthropologists now are into that um, a research study, and the inputs that they get, they share with their scientists colleagues, so that the actions to mitigate pandemic, actions to prevent future pandemics will be more holistic, to use the favorite anthropological term, holistic, in the sense that we do not only see the physical environmental aspect of it, but the social and human side of the problem. So we work hand in hand. How about in India, in Sri Lanka? How are the anthropologists, getting themselves involved?
Thank you,
in the
Dr.
pandemic?
Dr. Thank you, Dr. Carlos. We just over the 2 hours. So hopefully everyone will enjoy our initiative, and hopefully everyone will join our future program too. Our next program will be held in the 18th to the talk of anthropological background or historical background of anthropology from Malaysian perspectives. So now I request Dr. Tharaka
Yes, sir.
to further proceed.
Yes. I think that question raised. Now we are going to it should be organize another lecture to discuss that question. That is the problem in here. As we are in limited time schedule, I would like to now move to the last session today. As we have come to the end of today's session, I would like to invite Dr. Ratna Tayeng, Joint Convener, Dera Natung Government College, Itanagar, India, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Taraka ma'am. Indeed, a great honor for me to propose the vote of thanks. On behalf of Department of Anthropology, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Sri Lanka, Mrinalini Datta, Mahavidyapith, Kolkata, and Dera Natung Government College, Itanagar, India, I convey our gratefulness to Professor Carlos P. Tatel Jr., Associate Professor at Department of Anthropology, College of Social Science and Philosophy, University of the Philippines, Diliman, for accepting our request to deliver the first lecture of our international lecture series, jointly organized by the three departments. Sir, your expertise and subsequent deliberation on various aspects of Philippine anthropology have really given us many food for thoughts. Thank you very much, sir. And I would also like to thank all the members of the organizing committee. I would also like to acknowledge our gratefulness to all the participants for your gracious presence and being part of this event. We sincerely hope you will continue to encourage us and support us in all the upcoming lecture. Our coordinator, Suman sir, already announced that our next lecture will be on the 18th August this month, 2021. So thank you all once again. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tayeng, Ratna Tayeng. Now we have come to the end of the session. I would like to thank all of you for joining with us and hoping to meet you all in the next lecture. Thank you very much.